Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we've pulled together a stack of sources that, honestly, they pull us all across the globe.
They really do.
We're going from these high-stakes military standoffs to, profound humanitarian crises, and then all the way to some fundamental, almost invisible questions of human biology.
It's a true global snapshot, and our mission today is really to cut through that complexity. We're going to try to distill these broad, sometimes contradictory inputs into the key insights you need to get up to speed.
Right.
We're looking for that interconnectedness, how global tensions, the fight for human rights, and even our own biology are all, operating at the same time.
So where do we even begin? I think we have to start where the stakes are, well, arguably the highest.
Yeah.
These escalating global flashpoints. I'm looking at this intense brinkmanship between the U.S. and Venezuela. The sources are highlighting a direct, very public appeal from Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro to Donald Trump.
Yeah, and he's specifically warning him to avoid an Afghanistan-style forever war. He even invokes the memory of Libya, saying, "No more Libya."
That's a powerful reference.
It's a huge signal. It shows Caracas is taking this threat very, very seriously. And frankly, they should be. We're seeing a massive U.S. military buildup.
Including the arrival of the USS Gerald R. Ford aircraft carrier.
Exactly. The sources are describing this as the largest U.S. deployment in the region since the 1989 invasion of Panama?
And the official framing for this from the U.S. is what?
It's being explicitly framed under the War on Drugs banner. So, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth announced Operation Southern Spear, and the stated goal is to purge narco-terrorists.
To protect the U.S. from cocaine and fentanyl.
And this is where we really hit our first, major insight.
Okay.
Because the official justification, it just doesn't line up with the geographical reality on the ground.
How so?
Well, the sources are pretty clear. Venezuela is not a primary cocaine producer. That whole network, it runs through Bolivia, Colombia, and Peru. And maybe even more critically, Venezuela is not a hub for the fentanyl pipeline.
That runs north through Mexico.
Yeah, exactly. So what you have here is fundamentally a sophisticated cover story.
A kind of strategic misdirection. You use a politically palatable excuse, the war on drugs, to pursue what many observers believe is a political goal.
Regime change. Precisely.
Yeah.
It allows the operation to be branded for a domestic audience as a matter of national security, not foreign intervention.
And what's the response from Caracas?
Oh, it's just pure defiance. Their foreign minister, Ivan Gil, sent a very clear message. He basically said, "Don't you dare. We are ready."
And do we know what ready looks like? The sources suggest they have a pretty detailed plan.
They do. It seems they wouldn't fight a conventional war at all. It's more of a two-pronged strategy.
Okay, what are the prongs?
First, a guerrilla-style response. So using small military units positioned in over 280 locations across the country, just focusing on sabotage and disruption.
And the second part?
A policy they're calling anarchization. The idea is to sow chaos in Caracas itself, using the capital's sheer size and complexity to make it completely ungovernable for any invading force.
It's a high-stakes deterrence doctrine.
It really is.
So from those tensions in the Caribbean, let's shift to conflicts where the reckoning military or legal is already happening. The reports from Ukraine are unfortunately still focused on these relentless and deadly strikes.
They are. President Zelensky condemned the sheer scale of the Russian attacks overnight. He detailed the launch of approximately 430 drones and 18 missiles.
And the reports noted residential buildings were hit in, I think the quote was, practically every district of Kyiv.
That's right. And the specifics really bring home the cost. There was this horrifying incident where a drone hit the 7th floor of a block of flats.
In the Lisovie neighborhood, yeah.
And it caused floors 4 through 8 to just completely collapse. We know there were fatalities. It just shows the scale of the immediate human crisis.
Meanwhile, in the Caucasus, the battle is shifting. It's moving to the courtroom.
Yes, following the 2023 offensive in Nagorno-Karabakh, or Artsakh, Azerbaijan is seeking life sentences for 5 former leaders from the territory.
And the charges are incredibly serious. War crimes, terrorism.
They are, and this is where you see the complexity, because Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan has argued publicly that these prosecutions are actually hurting the wider peace process.
That's the core tension, isn't it? When does the pursuit of justice, however warranted, become a roadblock to, trust building and lasting peace?
It's a huge dilemma, and it's amplified because the International Court of Justice, the ICJ, is hearing opposing cases right now. With both Armenia and Azerbaijan accusing the other of ethnic cleansing, the legal and political pressures are all converging.
And continuing on that theme of high human cost, let's look at Gaza. The process of returning the remains of hostages under that U.S.-brokered ceasefire is just so slow and painful.
It is. 25 remains have been released, but 3 are still being held.
And we should remember the people behind those numbers.
Absolutely. The 3 individuals whose remains are still held are Ranjaveli, who served in an elite police unit, Dror Or, a dairy farm expert and a skilled cheesemaker, and Sutisak Rinthalak, who was an agricultural worker from Thailand. He was one of 31 Thais kidnapped in the initial attack.
Hamas is claiming it's a logistical problem, that the remains are buried under rubble.
While Israel has threatened to resume military operations if the bodies aren't returned immediately, it's just a grim example of how even the deceased can remain political bargaining chips.
A painful reality. Okay, let's pivot for a moment. Let's move away from these global conflicts and focus on maybe the resilience of individual action and the fight for safe passage. We can start with a positive story. The recognition of a Zimbabwean democracy activist, Namatai Kwekweza.
This is a really remarkable story. She's only 26 years old, and she's won the German Africa Prize,
Which is the highest German recognition for deserving Africans. She really represents this burgeoning energy of youth activism.
She does. She founded an organization called the Walid Trust when she was just 18 to train young leaders. And she's doing this in a climate that the sources describe as increasingly repressive.
And it's come at a huge personal cost. She's been arrested several times. She's reported torture, intimidation.
What's so fascinating here, I think, is the psychological insight she offers. She represents a new generation of Democrats, and this award connects her struggle to similar protest movements being driven by Gen Z in places like Kenya, Madagascar, and Cameroon.
She has this incredible, powerful quote. She says, "At the end of the day, we have to choose our hard."
That quote is just, it's so profound. It strips away any glamour from activism and gets right to the core decision facing young people in these regimes.
Right.
They're comparing 2 painful futures, the hard choice of speaking up, facing arrest, prison, even torture, versus the hard choice of staying silent and living a life that's limited in opportunity and freedom.
And she's arguing that the resistance, dangerous as it is the only path to a viable future. That really puts the risk into a different context. Now, moving to a different kind of fight for safe passage, this complex situation in South Africa involving Palestinian refugees.
Yes, this very controversial event that unfolded at OR Tambo Airport.
Right. South African authorities held 153 Palestinians who were believed to be from Gaza, including a woman who was 9 months pregnant, on a charter plane for about 12 hours.
12 excruciating hours. And the initial reason given for denying them entry was just pure bureaucracy.
It was a technicality. Their documents lacked Israeli exit stamps, didn't indicate a length of stay, no local addresses.
A pastor who was on the plane described the conditions as excruciatingly hot, with children screaming. The whole thing was only resolved after the Home Affairs Ministry got involved, and an NGO, Gift of the Givers, stepped in to offer accommodation.
And this incident sparked so much anger because of the irony.
The sheer irony.
South Africa is a historic, vocal supporter of the Palestinian cause, yet critics were pointing out that holding people like that on a plane violates fundamental constitutional rights, specifically the right to apply for asylum.
It just shows how even the most politically aligned nations can struggle when their own bureaucratic protocols clash with a humanitarian reality right in front of them.
Okay, let's make a dramatic shift here. We've been talking about the visible structures, conflict, law, politics. Now let's talk about the deep, invisible structures that shape us.
I like this jump.
Specifically, a fundamental human observation. Why are we overwhelmingly right-handed?
This is a fascinating topic because it gets to the deep structure of what it means to be human. About 85 to 90% of us are right-handed, and the sources confirm this preference gets set surprisingly early.
Yeah, it's not a habit we just pick up as toddlers. Scientists think the preference starts before birth.
That's right. Ultrasound scans show that fetuses are moving their right arm more by the 10th week, and by the 15th week, they're typically sucking their right thumb.
Which suggests a really powerful biological default.
It does, and we're not talking about 1 or 2 genes. The sources suggest up to 40 different genes might play a role in shaping handedness. Right-handedness seems to be the default outcome of early brain development.
So what about left-handedness?
It might just be due to slight, random variations during that embryonic brain development stage.
Of course, beyond the biology, there's culture. In some Asian, Arab, and African countries, the left hand is still sometimes seen as unclean.
And that leads to the societal pressure that can force children to use their right hand even if it's not natural for them.
But even with that cultural pressure, the evolutionary theories are really interesting. They suggest the majority persists because of ancient practical advantages.
For instance, the preference for using the right hand for tool use, that dates back at least 500,000 years.
And then there's that complementary and honestly kind of brutal theory that links handedness directly to combat survival. This feels like a real deep dive moment.
Absolutely. So the theory posits that right-handers had a survival advantage in combat because if you're fighting face-to-face, a right-handed thrust is most likely to stab your opponent's left thorax,
Right into the heart.
penetrating the heart. And over thousands of generations, that would have provided a consistent relative survival edge.
So, okay, if right-handers had this clear combat advantage, why didn't left-handers just disappear from the gene pool?
Well, their rarity became their advantage.
Also,
A lefty's movements are harder to predict, whether it's in combat or in, competitive sports. That unexpectedness gives them an edge in one-on-one competition.
so that allowed them to persist in the population at a stable minority level.
It's an evolutionary equilibrium driven purely by surprise.
That is just incredible. The idea that our majority status is tied to the best way to stab someone 500,000 years ago. Okay, let's finish our global sweep with a couple of critical quick hits.
Let's do it. Starting with some dramatic weather hitting the UK. Storm Claudia is bringing amber warnings across parts of England and Wales.
And we are talking about extreme rainfall. Potentially up to 150 millimeters, which is nearly 6 inches, over high ground.
To put that in perspective, that's like a whole month's average rainfall coming down in just 24 hours in some places.
Wow. And finally, a tragedy out of Bosnia.
Yes. The death toll from a retirement home fire in Tuzla has tragically risen to 15.
And the cause. It was such a simple yet catastrophic oversight.
An overburdened power cable from a resident's radio. It was squeezed between the bed and the wall, and it led to a short circuit. Authorities are now looking into potential neglect or oversight by the facility's management.
What a spread of inputs to synthesize today. From mass military deployments in the Caribbean to, the threat of life sentences in the Caucasus, and then that quiet, courageous choice of the activist in Zimbabwe.
And these realities are all unfolding simultaneously. We saw how geopolitical motivations can hide behind these technical justifications, like a war on drugs being used as strategic misdirection for regime change.
Right. We saw the high price of fighting for the rule of law and the complexity of providing humanitarian aid when it runs up against bureaucratic barriers.
And we closed with these deep, often invisible layers of biology that structure not just us as individuals, but maybe the survival of our species.
Which brings us to our final provocative thought for you to explore.
If our dominant hand is set before we're even born, encoded by dozens of genes, and potentially reinforced by these ancient, violent combat advantages.
Yeah, what does that really tell us about the limits of societal influence? About the deep, invisible structure of who we are?
It's a great question. Maybe, go explore the science behind your own dominant hand. See what you find.